Tonight's theme is, how do we build a better world? How can each of us contribute to creating a society that is more just, compassionate, and united? Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear from someone who has explored this question through his work and his faith, and who will share insights on practical ways we can help build a better world together. We are honored to welcome Steve Sarowitz. Steve is the founder of Paylocity and Wayfarer Studios. He also served as executive producer of The Gate, Dawn of the Bahá'í Faith, a documentary film. As a member of the Bahá'í Faith, Steve has long been inspired by the principle of the oneness of humanity and the belief that lasting social progress requires both material and spiritual solutions. For those who may be unfamiliar with the Bahá'í Faith, it's a worldwide religion that teaches the belief in one God, the unity of all people, the harmony of science and religion, the equality of women and men, and the importance of working together to build a more peaceful and just world. These principles have helped shape Steve's commitment to service and his efforts to contribute to the betterment of society. Tonight, he'll share some thoughts and perspectives related to this theme. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Steve Sarowitz.
If you guys like, I could take the night off and just have them sing.
No.
So thank you so much for that lovely introduction oh, okay, much better. I have a little height problem, so anything stationary is bad, and the songs were wonderful, those were perfect. And I love them both. So, when we think of the world today, what kind of world do we live in? Do we live in a world that's at peace? Do we live in a world where there's no problems? Do we live in a world where people get along, where there's no political problems, no economic problems? Or do we live in a world that feels very tense, that feels very uncertain? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress. Gosh, am I too loud? There's a lot of stress in this world. Why? When we think about people, do we think about their political party, their country, their race, their gender, their religion? How do you think of other people? Obviously not too well. Get out of my way, you're driving too slow. I'll tell you a little bit first of all about myself and then a little bit more about the faith. I was raised Reformed Jewish, and I was a happy Reformed Jew for 49 years. I still love the Jewish faith. Along the way, when I was in my mid-20s, I started studying Christianity, and after studying Christianity for just a few months, I had a pastor friend. I actually had a Chinese delivery restaurant, not one of my more successful ventures. I don't talk about it too much. But I had the good fortune of meeting my friend Kevin, and actually we still run once a week and study the Bible and pray. And he said to me, "Do you want to study the Bible?" And I said, "No, I'm Jewish." And he asked me again, I said, "No, I'm Jewish." And he asked me a third time, I said, "Oh, what the heck, I'll study with you." And after a couple months, I started asking myself the question. You see, I thought, and this is interesting now when I look back, that I was genetically unable to believe in Jesus. Genetically. Because for 2,000 years, and it pretty much was in my genes, for 2,000 years we disbelieved in Jesus as the Christ. And I never asked myself why. It was there. It was like, I have a knee, I have an elbow, and I don't believe in Jesus. And my whole family was like that. We never asked why. We never really asked any questions. And I started questioning. I said, well, why don't I believe in Jesus? And what does that even mean? Does it mean I don't believe he existed? Does it mean I don't believe that he was the Messiah? And so I started reading his words, and I fell in love with Jesus. But I never became a Christian. I just became a Jew who loved Jesus quite a bit. And I liked the Bible, and we kept studying. And then I heard about the Bahá'í Faith in college. And it sounded great. Someone told me something about progressive revelation, which is really, in my mind, one of the most wonderful teachings of the Bahá'í Faith, that a single God has progressively sent prophets to help humanity in every age. Great idea, and Jews didn't have to hate Christians, and Christians didn't have to hate Jews, and Muslims didn't have, also basically supposed to love everybody. I thought, that sounds pretty good. But I was a 20-year-old college kid, and I went back to doing that, and didn't really think about the Bahá'í Faith, other than when someone would ask me, I'd say, well, I like what the Baha'is have to say. And that's what I said for over 20 years. And then I had a couple friends of mine who invited me to a Baha'i study group, and after a few years, I surprised them by becoming a Baha'i. They didn't know what to do with me then. And it's really changed my life in many ways, because as a Baha'i, as a Jew, I was a happy Jew. Like I said, I liked Reform Judaism. I didn't realize that it was mostly Baha'i already. But Reform Jews believe in the equality of women and men. We believe in harmony between religion and science. None of those things are in the Torah, the Jewish teachings. They're all Baha'i ideas. But I didn't know that, because I didn't know anything about Baha'i. As I started learning more about Baha'i, I realized I'd been taught a lot of Baha'i ideas already. And in fact, those ideas have really infiltrated a lot of our thought. They've really been cascading through humanity. So when you think about the Baha'i Faith, it's the latest religion in the world. It's the latest chapter in a single book of God. It's not that Baha'i Faith is right and Christianity is wrong, or the Baha'i Faith is right and Judaism is wrong. It's just a newer version of Judaism. It's a newer version of Christianity, of Islam. And it's the rules have been updated because we need different things in this world. So when Baha'u'llah was teaching in the mid-19th century, Baha'u'llah said some really radical things at that time. He said, women are equal to men. Well, at the time, not a single woman could vote. Women were essentially slaves, second-class citizens all around the world. And I'm not going to say that it's perfect today. There's still some things we need to do. But think of the great strides we've made forward. Raise your hand if you think women are not equal to men. Oh wait, he's not getting fed tonight. Nowadays, there's very few people who don't truly believe that women are equal to men. Now, whether we treat women as equals to men in every aspect, that's something different. But we've advanced greatly. Women can vote. Women can have credit cards. When I was young, women couldn't have credit cards. Just things we take for granted now. Many things have already changed drastically. Now we go to racial equity. Baha'u'llah said there was a single human race. That was radical then. I live in Chicago. In the Field Museum, there was a very prominent sculptor who in the 1930s had these sculptures of people as if they were different species, people of different races. And as we know now, scientifically, race is just an imagination. It's imaginary. There is no such thing as race. Genetically, we are one human race. It's been proven. It was proven in the mid-1980s. And yet we still have so much racism. So while the idea of race is a figment of our imaginations, racism is not. And so Baha'u'llah in the 1800s was telling us that we're one human race. And he gave us many instructions on how to root out racism, which, again, we've made a lot of strides. You can have mixed race couples now, and nobody blinks, and you have them on every TV commercial, or a lot of them, and that's, to me, wonderful. And I've been in a mixed race marriage for many years, and that's great. But we have a long ways to go. The nice thing is we've made some progress. The next thing Baha'u'llah says is, the earth is but one country, mankind its citizens. Think about that right now. We have so many wars going on. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. You've got all these wars going on, all these people hating each other because they're quote-unquote a different country. Step up a little bit. Go to 10,000 feet. Go to 100,000 feet. Go to space. The earth is but one country, Baha'u'llah said in the 1800s, mankind its citizens. What's really amazing about that is think about the world when Baha'u'llah was saying this. Think about the world well over 100 years ago, in the 1800s, 150 years ago. We didn't have computers. We didn't have phones. It was a much bigger place then. The world has gotten so much smaller. We didn't have the internet. And yet Baha'u'llah could see that. People when he was saying this, most of them didn't travel more than 20 miles from their house in their entire life. This new age we're in requires new teachings. And now we come to maybe the biggest and the hardest one for people to understand. And that is that all religions are one, that they're chapters in a single eternal faith of God. In this country, something really momentous happened. Something happened in 1893. Does anyone know what happened in 1893? Roya?
Parliament of World Religions.
The very first Parliament of the World Religions in Chicago, my hometown. So in Chicago in 1893 comes the first Parliament of the World's Religions as part of the Great Chicago World's Fair. It's the very first interfaith conference. You see, prior to that, the Catholics stayed with the Catholics, and the Protestants stayed with the Protestants, and the Jews with the Jews, and the Muslims with the Muslims, and most people didn't know anything about any other religion. That was also the introduction of Swami Vivekananda, if I said it right, the Hindus. So the Hindus come to the United States. You know, at that point, most people didn't even know what a Muslim was. And yet, look at the world today. So religions are now living next to each other, and some are even talking. But the problem is today, it's still, what you're seeing is probably the most people have advanced to is interfaith. The idea that religions are different, separate but equal. Tolerance. Have you had someone say tolerance? And what's the other word?
Patience.
Patience? No,
Coexistence.
coexistence. That's the word I was looking for. Coexistence. How many people like coexistence? Raise your hand. Tolerance. Not bad. Okay. I'm going to go coexist with you.
I acknowledge your existence.
I'm going to tolerate you. That's what Jesus said. Go tolerate your neighbor. Barely. That's not what that's not what Jesus said. That's not what Moses said. That's not what the Buddha said. And that's definitely not what Baha'u'llah said. Actually, Baha'u'llah goes one step above love your neighbor. In this age, he says, we prefer our neighbors over ourselves. So we go beyond loving them. We actually prefer them over our very selves in this modern age. So when we think about religion, it's still a great barrier, a great source of consternation. In fact, even right just before coming up here and talking, I was talking with a good friend who was asking me about, well, what about this particular religion? And I don't know about those guys. And like, well, first of all, we're all one. And second of all the religions are good. But we don't necessarily do good things necessarily in the name of religion. What we need to do, and what Baha'u'llah taught, and what the Bahá'í Faith teaches, is that every religion is good. And the followers are mostly good. There's some people who are extremists, and I would condemn all extremism. If you're going to kill in the name of your religion, I think that's a bad thing, particularly if you're going to kill me. But even more so as a Baha'i, if you're going to kill my neighbor. That's a bad thing, and that happens in the name of many religions. And so, instead of saying this religion is bad, we could just say extremism is bad in the name of any religion. And that all religions at their core are good. Muhammad, he said, none of you truly believes unless he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. And of course, both Moses, since Jesus was quoting Moses, said, love your brother as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself, I mean. Who's your brother? Who's your neighbor? Where are the asterisks? Is it your white neighbor? Your Christian neighbor? Your male, female neighbor? Your neighbor who's a U.S. citizen? Or is it all your neighbors? That's what Baha'u'llah was doing. He's explaining to us who our neighbors are, who our brothers are. It's everybody. And this is the key. This is the key to making it a better world. You see, one thing in the Baha'i Faith that we believe as Baha'is is that world peace is not only possible, but inevitable. And that we can work actively towards world peace. One of the major problems in the world today is most people go about their business and never work one step towards making the world more united and peaceful. But that is the most important thing. I spent most of my professional career building a company. I built a little company called Paylocity. I started in 1997, started with one employee, and I worked very hard and got very lucky. More luck than hard work, but a little bit of hard work too. And that company today has 6,500 employees and went public in 2014 and did very well. And since I had too much money, I started a movie company. And have invested over $100 million in a company called Wayfarer Studios. Maybe not so great financially, but wonderful because we're now, as of this year, going to have made 20 movies and some lovely movies to make the world a better place. We're working on 3 movies right now. My pet movie is a movie called Hello Darkness. We're shooting it right now as we speak in New York City. It's about a man named Sandy Greenberg. And Sandy Greenberg was 19 years old, going to school at Columbia University, tall, athletic, super brilliant, incredibly brilliant to this very day. Actually, he's in his mid-80s now. And he went blind. So he goes home to Buffalo, New York, nursing his wounds. His life is basically over, and his roommate Arthur comes and gets him and says, "You can't stay here. You have to come back to Columbia with me. You're my best friend. I can't live without you." Drags him back, kicking and screaming, to Columbia, gets a team of people to read to him, take him to class, and Sandy graduated Columbia University in the 1960s, summa cum laude. Then he went to Harvard University just to go beyond that and got a master's degree from Harvard, a PhD from Oxford, came back to the United States, became a presidential fellow under Lyndon B. Johnson. Then he became an inventor, an entrepreneur, a millionaire, and a philanthropist, all while blind. And Arthur, his roommate, was supposed to become an architect, but Sandy says, "Hey, you got a nice singing voice like the Dakota Brothers." And he says, "Hey, maybe you could sing. And you sang with your friend in high school, why don't you sing with him? You could always use," Arthur had studied to become an architect. He said, "You could always become an architect later." But Sandy says, "No, try singing out. You got a special voice." Arthur says, "No, I hate my friend." They'd gotten into a big fight, but Sandy convinces them to get back together, sing a song. They sing a song, which starts with how Arthur used to greet Sandy. Sandy pays $400 for those 2 of them to record that song, which starts with how Arthur greeted Sandy. "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again." The #1 song of the year it came out, "Sound of Silence." Paul Simon and Arthur, Art Garfunkel. So why do I mention that movie? Because it's everything I want to do. See, what do you do with money? You make the world a better place. And why? What inspires me? My faith. What is that movie is a movie about friendship, about love. It also is about the nobility, in particular, of Sandy Greenberg as a blind man, he's an amazing man. It's about putting a spotlight on blind people. And actually, Sandy has dedicated his life to ending blindness. And I've dedicated, when I agreed to make the movie with Sandy, 100% of the profits of the movie towards ending blindness. We may not make any profits. Most movies don't. But if we do, it'll help. And the whole thing is, when you lead your life, it's about making the world a better place. So when Paylocity went public, I did very well. And I didn't buy a yacht, mainly because I never liked yachts. And I didn't join a country club because, I think there's an old joke about any country club that would have you isn't worth joining. But I also just never really liked things. I drive a Toyota, I still do. I did then, I do now. And I had some extra money. And so I decided to give it all away. And my faith drives me with this. So everything I do is about ending racism, about ending sexism, about ending nationalism, about ending religious prejudice. So I started a foundation, which I ended up closing down last year and just going to private giving. But I'm going to give away the great majority of my fortune, and I've given away several $100 million already to organizations, mainly grassroots organizations, and I'm using the faith as a guidance. Raise your hand here if you're Baha'i. Probably a few. Raise your hand here if you're not Baha'i. Don't feel bad. Okay, we got a few of you too. So let me just tell you, to the non-Baha'is, you're welcome here all the time. And the one thing you should know about the Baha'i faith, the independent investigation of truth, and that everybody is always welcome at Baha'i events like this, because we believe you're one human family. We're not going to say you're worse because you're not a Baha'i in any way, shape, or form. But anyway, for the Baha'is, there's something, and for the non-Baha'is actually, there's something called the 9-year plan. So the Baha'i faith has is run. Baha'i Faith has no clergy. So in this, and the question is, why does the Baha'i Faith have no clergy? Well, because we can read. And what I mean by that is, in 1800, I think it was 88% of the world was illiterate. And today, that's reversed. I think it's 87% of the world is literate. So back around 1800, we needed clergy because most of us couldn't read. But today, most of us can read. And you see, if we want to read the Bible, we can read it ourselves. We can read the Quran ourselves. We can read the Baha'i writings ourselves. And so we don't need clergy. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about clergy. I have friends who are rabbis and priests and ministers, and that's great. But we don't need that today in the modern world. And so the Baha'i Faith is run by committees, by assemblies. So we have, raise your hand if you're on the Santa Monica Local Spiritual Assembly. It's a thankless job, but thank you. It's a position of service, right?
Of course.
How much are you paid for that?
24/7, 365.
It's a 24/7 job, which I understand because I'm on my own LSA, Local Spiritual Assembly. It's 24/7 for free, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. It's a position of service. And then there's the National Spiritual Assembly, even more of a position of service. And then every 5 years, if you really want to kill yourself, you go on the Universal House of Justice, which is 9 members. They're all 9 members. And the 9 members of the House of Justice work around the clock for very little. And it's a great position of service. And so the House of Justice put out something called the 9-year plan. And the 9-year plan is telling us how to make a world a better place. So I'm not that smart, so it's real easy. I just use the 9-year plan. And the 9-year plan is telling us to work in communities, to really raise up communities. That's grassroots work. So when I do philanthropy, first of all, I look for communities in need. And actually, this is an embarrassment, actually to the world, I think, that the majority of the people I help are Black, Brown, and Native American. Why do I say that? Because they shouldn't be. We're all human. It means that we have prejudice. And so I'm actually tilting against that prejudice. I want to help everybody, and I want to help I'd love to be able to say to you, and someday, it's probably never going to happen in my lifetime, but hopefully soon, where I could just get up to you and say, I help people in exact proportion of, I help Black people this much, and because there's 13%, I help 13% Black people, and I help, whatever the percentages actually are, but that's not the case right now. The case is that we have not only prejudice, but the effects of hundreds of years of prejudice that we have to undo. The Baha'i Faith does say, and I want to say this to all the Baha'is here very loudly, just in case you've forgotten, the Baha'i Faith says the number one thing that we have to deal with in this country is racism. So that's my number one thing. And then it talks a little bit about the equality of women and men, so I stick with that. Somebody tried to get me to go off that and say people of all genders, and I said no. I'm going to help women. I don't have any problem with people of all genders. I'm actually a man myself, and I don't hate men. But if the Baha'i Faith says to help make women's rights a thing, then I'm going to do it and focus on it. And so I'm really trying to focus right on the things the writings say. The Baha'i Faith says to fight against religious prejudice, so we do. We have some wonderful programs we have contributed to in Israel. I'll talk about them. One in particular is a group called United. It's a high school, and it has Arab youth, high schoolers, and Jewish side by side, and kids from 20 countries. And I went there, and I was stunned by how beautiful it was. It made my week just to go there. And it really showed that that song you sang, where there is love, nothing is too much trouble. Because, if anyone has noticed, there's a little trouble between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And guess what? Those kids went through that war together, and I mean together. And they didn't always agree on everything. But I talked to Nurit, who runs the program, and she said they stayed together, and they listened to each other, and they hugged each other, and they cried together. And maybe they didn't always agree, but you have to get together, you have to talk, you have to be in the same room. And that's the type of program I'm going to give to. There's another program very similar to that in Akko, which, as Baha'is know, is our holiest place on earth. I found it by accident. Actually, before I became a Baha'i, I was asked to build a center for Jews and Arabs in Akko. And it's working like a charm. It's run by a Palestinian friend of mine. As I mentioned, I come from a Jewish background. And Every day you have a bus pull up with Arab kids and a bus pulled up with Jewish kids, and the first day they don't talk to each other, the second day, because they haven't ever seen each other in school, they go to separate schools, which is a shame. And then the third day they become friends. And a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a big problem. There was some unrest in the country. I think there was worse than, not as bad as recent, but there was some unrest. And unfortunately, there was violence in Akka. And they burned down my favorite restaurant, which is Oribori. I like the shrines almost as much as Oribori. No, that's not true. I like Oribori almost as much as the holy shrines. And they also burned down my favorite hotel there called the Effendi, which is owned by the same person. And it burned down several places. And I talked to Naeem, my friend who runs the center there, and he was heartbroken. I mean, literally in tears. And then he went out and talked to the kids, and he said, "Oh my God, I thought this was working, and I see it didn't work. You know, my life work is over. You know, it just failed." And they said, "No, Naeem. We were the ones who went out afterwards and cleaned up. None of us participated. The program had worked. We just didn't have enough kids in it. And after that, we doubled down and got more kids in the program." You see, Baha'u'llah says that his domain is the human heart. Is it the city of the heart? The human heart. We are one human family. It's very clear. When we stop to think for 1 second, we're one human family. We need to start every day thinking that. We need to love every human being that comes across our paths. We need to help everyone we can. It's very simple. And each of us has different gifts. I was gifted with a lot of money. It's an accident. I don't come from a wealthy family. I'm not the smartest guy. I got lucky. My company went public. I worked hard. I was in the right place at the right time. But I can tell you I had a lot of lucky breaks along the way. Sometimes I'm not sure wealth is lucky, but anyway, it is some days. But if you have wealth, share it. You know, the one who dies with the most toys actually doesn't win. We're here to make our souls richer, not our bodies. It's not to say that you can't have a nice house and a nice car, or you can't go out to a nice dinner or stay in a nice hotel, but we're here together. Share what you have. And your wealth may be different than mine. Some of you are doctors and lawyers and teachers. God bless the teachers. Maybe the lawyers a little less. But just kidding. I love lawyers. I've been talking to them a lot the last year and a half. But, and I love my lawyers. But whatever we're doing, what Baha'u'llah says to do is to live your life like a prayer. So live each and every day like a prayer. Every part. So when you're singing, thank you boys, by the way, young men now. Isn't that great? Aren't you proud of him? By the way, he's a newlywed. Give him a hand. I wanted my son to marry a princess. He literally did. So every day is a prayer. So when you're singing a song, make it a prayer. When you're an accountant, you're doing accounting. When you're a teacher, when you're a lawyer, when you're a doctor, whatever you're doing, banker, make it a prayer. Make it an ode to God. Make it a way. And if each of us does that, just a little bit more. You see, one of us can't do it. Even Elon Musk, with all his money, if he were to take it and dedicate it to the betterment of the world, it's just a drop in the bucket. It's a big drop in his case, but it's just a drop. Even me, with all the money I have, it's a drop in the bucket. We have to work together, and each of us has to work together. And it's important to know, one thing I'll say about philanthropy, is it cannot be me, the great, helping the poor. It's me just sharing what I have. It's a sharing thing. And so when I go into a community, it's not about me coming to that community and saving them. It's me contributing to a community that already knows what to do, and I'm just providing a resource that I have. I'm sharing. I'm sharing what I have, and they're sharing what they have. It's empowering, not coming in top down. That's very important about philanthropy. It's finding people who are already doing the work and saying, hey, I can help. One of my favorite people in the world is my good friend Michael O'Neill, who's done something called Parent University in Savannah. And now he's in several cities, and I've been helping him. And I can tell you, I'm not helping him by doing the work. I'm not helping him by telling him how to do the work. I just give him money, and Michael does the rest. Of course, we become good friends along the way, and occasionally I've given him a little bit of advice, and sometimes that advice is even right on good days. But most importantly, I'm just empowering somebody who's a hero of mine to already do that work that he was doing. And there's many people like Nareed, like Naeem, that are doing that work every day. I'm just providing a piece of that. And I think that that's how we should look at it. One thing in the Baha'i Faith that's really important that we have to keep in mind is that none of us is any better than any of us. We're one human family, and so we're just here together. And humility is extremely important. And to understand it, and look at everyone and see that person as noble. With Wayfair Studios, our goal is to make films about the nobility of every human being. We made a film called Ezra. Did anyone raise your hand if you saw Ezra? Not enough of you. Not enough of them. I knew not enough people saw that film. But if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's an amazing. Did you guys like it?
Yep.
It's this beautiful film about this 11-year-old autistic boy who gets kidnapped by his own father, who's got a restraining order. But it's one of the best films we've made. It just didn't get enough people seeing it. But it shows the nobility of that young boy who has autism, and the father who probably has autism himself, written by an actual writer who has 2 autistic sons, and it's really about him trying to communicate and get close to his own autistic son.
Where is it?
It's streaming. You can just look up Ezra.
Netflix.
What's that? Netflix. You can find it on Netflix and probably Amazon and all the places. We made a movie, which it's been in the news for all the wrong things, but we made it for the right reasons, called It Ends With Us. And what's that movie about? It's about a woman who's trying to be empowered and stop the trauma, the cycle of trauma from domestic violence. And we weren't as successful with that movie as really getting the message out, but we tried, and that was our intent. And we made a movie with the wonderful Scarlett Johansson called Eleanor the Great. She directed it. We helped. We provided funds, and that was about this. It's about trauma and grief. So, but the whole thing is we're showing them. In that case, it's a 94-year-old woman where she's suffering from grief, and so we're showing humanity and showing the light. And I believe that art, your singing, movies, reflects life, and life reflects art. And if we're going to raise up the world, what we watch is really important. The movies we watch, the podcasts we watch. We started a podcast network, as someone knows very well, with another company called Companion Arts. And we have these really cool podcasts. The first one, which is doing pretty well, is called Soul Boom with Rainn Wilson. And so we try to do is promote in everything we do the betterment of the world. I've been given a few gifts to do that, and I'm grateful for that. But there's a lot of people doing a lot of things in the Baha'i world. I see it every day. For me, probably the most important thing I do every day is tell someone new about the Baha'i Faith. Not because I want everyone, well, I kind of do want everyone to become a Baha'i, but I don't really. I have my own son is a very passionate Christian, and I'm very happy that he is, and I had a great conversation with him today. Love him to death. My daughter's Jewish, she was raised Jewish. Both my kids were raised Jewish. I don't really care I just want people to be good people. I'm working with Angel Studios. I'm on the board of Angel Studios. They're LDS, or sometimes people call them Mormons, and they're trying to bring light to the world. So I think one of the things is to work with people of all faiths, of all races, of all colors and creeds, all nationalities, to try and make the world a better place. To love the person in front of you and find people of good faith, of all different faiths, and work with them and say, look, this is what we're going to do. Hey Tim. So speaking of NSA members, and now I have to behave myself. And filmmakers who make films that matter. So each person has something to contribute. And so we all contribute what we can to make the world a better place. And it's not about how great you are, and it's not about accolades. It's about service. Every life should be a life of service. And so what can we individually do? And we're all given gifts. Abdul Baha, by the way, for those of you who aren't Baha'is, that's Abdul Baha. And the song, Nothing is Too Much Trouble, and where there's love, nothing is too much trouble, that is from Abdul Baha. But he said, when someone asked him, what's one word to describe the Baha'i Faith? Does anyone remember what he said?
Service.
Encouragement. Exactly, encouragement. So he said encouragement. Encourage your neighbor. Love your neighbor and encourage your neighbor. And set an example for your neighbor. Get up every morning, try to make the world a better place in our own little way. And each of us is given gifts. So I encourage all of you to take the gifts you've been given, whatever they may be, and share them with the world generously. Work on yourself first. And we've been doing this for the last several weeks. This book just came out, and so what Baha'u'llah says is immerse yourself in the ocean of my words. I've been doing that for over a decade now. You know, it's having some effect. It wasn't great material to start out with, but I'm trying. And so I'm reading this book, as Baha'u'llah says, read it every morning and every evening. So I do. I read this book every morning and every evening. And it really helps. And I pray and memorized half the hidden words. Kind of got stuck there. And I say them every day. And so I feel like as I'm doing that, it's almost like taking a spiritual shower. So work on yourself first. And all of us have things to work on. I think, none of us is perfect. We all have things to work on, but work on yourself first, and then if that fails, just go and be kind to someone. On your worst days, go find someone to help. That's what Abdul Baha said. And if we do that collectively, that's how the world is made a better place. It's not a magical formula. The first thing, I'm going to say this again, is to have a world-embracing view. The very first thing is to have a world-embracing view, to understand that we're one human family. And to make every decision like that way. To make every decision to make sure every human being you come in contact with is loved. Now here's the hard part. What about the people that aren't very lovable? Love them twice. What Baha'u'llah said, and this is interesting in this age. So does anyone know what Jesus said about enemies? And love your enemy. But Baha'u'llah didn't say that. In fact, when Jesus is saying, love your enemy, he's kind of saying, okay, when Moses said this, but I'm going to take you forward and say, love your enemy. And then Baha'u'llah takes us forward still. Does anyone remember what Baha'u'llah said about loving our enemies?
You don't even see them.
Exactly. So go one step further. Don't have any enemies. God only knows that's been difficult for me in the last year and a half. But I pray every day. Every day I do. Did it today. For those people, some people would consider my enemies. And someone asked me about that. In fact, someone started telling me something bad about someone. And I said, no, that's not how to think about it. Pray for them. I'm not here to tell you anything bad about anybody. I'm going to tell you that, I've been in a very contentious lawsuit for a year and a half, and I'm not here to tell you anything bad about the people on the other side, because they're people. What I will say is they have a soul just like you and me, and I pray for them every day. Not because I love everything they've done. In fact, I pray for them harder because I don't. How many people have seen Cast Aside the Clouds?
We are going to see.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know what Cast Aside the Clouds, I talked about it last night real quick, but I'll say it again. It's this beautiful movie about a Baha'i woman in Iran who falls in love with her Muslim doctor. And my favorite line in that movie is, I'm a Baha'i. What power does your faith give you? My faith gives me the power to forgive you. As she's getting tortured. And that's how I felt the last year. I agree with Baha'u'llah. Make nobody your enemy. It's hard, but that's the right way to be. Love everybody. What Abdul Baha said is see my face in everybody. Sometimes it's hard, but do it. Have a world-embracing view. See the face of God in everyone you see, because we're all souls. And those of us who aren't very good, and it's all of us, say us, myself included, we aren't very good at being good souls. Those of us who are the worst at it, pray for them twice. Help them along. Love them. A little story I'll tell you, and then I'll close out because I want to leave it up for some questions. You guys just don't want to hear me, I want to hear you as well. But my friend, who always has great stories, told me a really beautiful story. Happened in Yemen. And there was a couple of terrorists, I think they were ISIS or Al-Qaeda, I'm not sure which one. And they were terrorists, they do what terrorists do, kill people and stuff. And they met a Baha'i. And they didn't know what a Baha'i was. One of them met a Baha'i. And he says, well, what's that? And he asked the guy next to him, he says, oh, they're Baha'i, they're vermin, and whatever else they say about Baha'is. Terrible things. Do you know anything else? I don't know, go ask him, he's a Baha'i, he'll tell you. And so he goes and asks the Baha'i gentleman, and the Baha'i gentleman tells him a little bit more about the faith. But he says, I can't really tell you that much. The guy who really knows a lot more is this guy in jail. And it turns out the guy in jail was a guy like me who teaches the Bahá'í Faith nonstop, and in Yemen that gets you put in jail. I'd definitely be in jail or dead if I was in a place like Yemen, which I think is a good thing. But anyway, so he goes to jail, he sees the guy in jail, and the guy tells him about the faith, and he becomes a Baha'i and instantly changes. Along with his, I think it was him and his father, they both became Baha'is, and they went from paragons of hate to paragons of love, instantly. And I think that story is very hopeful. Don't meet hate with hate, meet hate with love. It's very difficult to do that, but meet hate with love. We are supposed to love. Now, there is a little Baha'i thing, and I'll maybe close with this. O friend, in the garden of thy heart, plant naught but the rose of love. And from the nightingale of affection and desire, by the way, that's Baha'u'llah, loosen not thy hold. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. So some people you love from a little bit of a distance. Self-preservation. But love everybody. Have a world-embracing view, serve the world, and love everybody. It's not that hard. And tell people about it. Wake people up. Ask them what kind of world they want to live in. I do it all the time. And you'd be surprised at how few people say, I want to live in the world we live in. It's great. More war. Nobody says that. But most people don't think we can change it. And I'm telling you unequivocally that we can. Together. So with that, let me open it up to any questions.